Hello. Hello, everyone. So this is the meetup that was originally organized by the blockchain and Ethereum Brussels meetup group. We were supposed to have this in late March, and we couldn't. And then it was postponed, and finally we're doing it online. So first of all, thank you to the guys in Brussels for organizing this. Benjamin and Olivier and I guess a few others. So let's just see how this looks like. Do we have some idea of who is watching this online? I don't see, in this interface, I don't see whether there are people watching this, whether we should wait a bit for people to join or not.
On YouTube, it shows 4 people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Okay, so shall we wait a few more minutes? What do you mean, Benjamin? Do you know if anyone of your group are planning to join?
They will probably join if it's not already the case. Now there's 6 people watching. Maybe you can start by giving us, let's say, the big picture.
Yeah. So
sorry, I see that Luis is complaining about the audio. For me, the audio is good, but I'm not on YouTube.
Okay. Is there anyone on YouTube who also has problems with the audio?
Okay, it seems to be fine then. Probably some connection issue for Luis.
Yeah. Okay. So, right. Let me just give you, let's have a look here at what the plan was. So this, the title of this meetup was Blockchain, IOUs, and Monetary Autonomy. So the idea is to first discuss reasonably briefly, why do you want to put IOUs on blockchain? Because SikobaPay and Sikoba is a project to put IOUs on blockchain. Then we'll have a demo of the basically beta version of the SikobaPay app. We will discuss applications of SikobaPay. And meanwhile, people are free to ask questions about the project. So let me just briefly, while we're still at the beginning, introduce Dragan, who's the core developer of SikobaPay.
Hello.
He's got in his confinement beard. And we've got Guillaume, our CTO, who will tell us a little bit later about some of the crypto issues that we are dealing with.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get started with a discussion and see if I can show you this on the screen. Now let's see if this will work. Slideshow. go. So I'll try and share the my screen if I can. This one here. Can you see it? Ah, yes, you can see. Right. So I'm skipping a lot of introductory stuff, okay, in this, and we're going to get right to the concept of credit conversion. Just before that, let me just say very briefly that the idea is here to recognize that money is essentially debt. It's like an IOU, but a very particular kind of IOU. And these scenarios that we'll show here will try to explain what this is. So let's take the case that a person wants to purchase a car, right? That person, maybe before showing this, I mean, you can imagine that if that person goes directly to the car merchant, the dealer, and the dealer asks him, well, how do you want to pay for the car? And let's say he says, well, I'll just write you an IOU. I'll take a piece of paper, I'll write my name on it, my address, and I'll say, I owe you that much money. I'll even sign it for you, right? And the car dealer will probably say, you're crazy, right? Of course, the car dealer will not accept that, except in some extraordinary cases maybe, but in general, this will not work. So what will the buyer do? If in case, of course, he doesn't have the money readily available, the typical thing is he'll go to the bank. So what will happen there? At the bank, let's say the bank agrees to lend this purchaser money. What happens when a bank lends the money? Lending money means that the buyer signs an IOU to the bank, so the bank owes 100 units, and the counterpart is that the bank also owes the buyer 100 units. And the fact that the bank owes has a debt, an IOU, that is what we call money. So I think it's reasonably, hopefully clear to everyone that before that situation, let's go one back, it's not like the bank had the money to lend out, okay? The money doesn't exist until the bank writes out the IOU. So the bank therefore creates the money. And just in passing, it's also not the case that the bank has to somehow get something from the central bank to do that. So money is simply a bank IOU. And then with this IOU, that is basically the money, the fact that you have a bank IOU, the buyer can go now to the car merchant and say, hey, I've got another kind of IOU for you that we call money, and the merchant will accept it, and then we can have the exchange, for the bank IOU exchange for the car. Now a car of 100 something is maybe not very expensive, maybe it's a very old and very used car. So that's and now why do we call it credit conversion? It's because the buyer's credit typically isn't high enough to deal with the merchant, right? The merchant doesn't accept the credit of the buyer. And so what we've seen is that the buyer had to exchange his credit with the credit of the bank. So instead of going to the merchant with his own IOU, he has exchanged his IOU to the bank IOU, which is money. And then with that IOU, after this exchange, which is a credit conversion, he can go and buy a car or some other stuff, okay? So money gets essentially created in this way via a credit conversion. And credit conversion also happens to be an essential feature of SikobaPay. So the next thing I'd like to go through is the credit cycle. And again, this is more to give people a concept of how this whole monetary system works. So you've got super simple scenario. You've got a let's call him a capitalist. You've got a bank. You've got how polite, just the people. And now, maybe a brief note on capitalists. People think that capitalists are guys with lots of money. Actually, the typical capitalist is someone who has debt. Okay, that's what the thing is. And the fact that some capitalists end up having lots of money, that's a result of capitalism. It's not what capitalism is about, at least in my view. So the capitalist once has an idea and typically does not have enough money, has to get it from investors or from a bank. And let's say he goes to the bank, and we go in this direction. And now, same thing, the bank, for whatever reason, trusts the capitalist. Maybe he's well known, maybe he's done some interesting projects before, maybe he's got some assets. So he exchanges his IOU against the bank's IOU. With his IOU, he can now hire people and pay for goods and services. So some of the money that the bank owes the capitalist now gets transferred to the people who presumably work for the capitalist, and at the end the capitalist has some goods that he produced in some factory maybe or whatever. And as we can see here, out of the 100 credit that he had at the bank, he's paid people and suppliers. He's only got 10 left. Meanwhile, his debt to the bank has increased because of interest. So he's now in a very delicate situation because, he's basically broke, but he's got these goods which he needs to sell. So if everything goes well, he takes these goods and sells them to who? Well, to the people. Who else? There's no one else there in a closed economy. And so this has, if you go from here to there, you see, this is before selling the goods. And now he sells the goods, and you can see the goods go to the people, and the people have paid. And in this case, the people end up even owing the bank something. But there are many different scenarios. The idea is this is more or less a good outcome. The capitalist has been able to sell his goods at a slight profit, which is, of course, not always the case. That's he repays his debt, and we can see that there's still an IOU from the bank, and here the bank is actually positive, and probably bank has now some money to buy back some services from the people. There's a second scenario in which the goods produced by the capitalist somehow either are not of good quality, or no one wants to buy them, or they get destroyed in a flood, or something happens. You can see that the capitalist has, and there's a K here, but that's still has the debt outstanding to the bank, and now he doesn't have a way to repay that debt. So this debt basically becomes, the capitalist goes bankrupt. The bank has to write off the debt, and we can see that the bank still owes the people whatever amount, and now as a result, the bank itself goes bust, and that was that. And what this scenario shows is that essentially money needs to be spent. That if the people who are creditors do not buy the goods produced by the debtors, the result may simply be a collapse of some, in this case, a local financial system. Okay, and that's quite important. Money has to flow. Because facing every creditor is a debtor, and if the people holding the money, who are the creditors, refuse to spend it, there is a risk that the money will become worthless, because the debtors will go bust, and then the money will itself become worthless. Okay, and I think that was the first thing I wanted to go through. money. So bottom line, money must be spent in order to keep its value. Okay, the second thing I wanted to go through briefly. I need to stop sharing for a brief second and find this article here. Just right there. If I can find it. Okay, almost there. Okay, so I will share screen again briefly and just yeah, that was just a link to an article. I'll provide this link in the comments. So you can read that. The idea is the following: that throughout history, credit in the sense of delayed payment has been used a lot by companies, by everyone. Only a few, not a few, maybe a bit more than 1 century, but certainly 2 centuries ago, even in Europe, when people did business or people went to the store, very often they didn't pay. They simply went to the store and they said, write it down. Between businesses, a lot was done on credit. You know, sell me something, deliver something, I'll pay you later. In countries like England, even shops issued their own tokens, in the sense that when you went there, you bought something and you got your change, the shop might give you its own tokens in exchange, which were basically IOUs. So IOUs were used a lot, and as I also describe in this article, even as late as the 1980s and 1990s, IOUs were used on a massive scale in Germany, which was one of the last European countries to use that. Between companies, typically when one company paid the other, they wouldn't transfer them the money or send them a check. They would simply write them an IOU due in so many months. Okay, so it was completely normal. And we have forgotten this, that you can do stuff with IOUs, that money is very useful, of course, but if you use IOUs, you can become less dependent on the banking system. And so on the one side, you could say, well, we've got such an efficient and great banking system, so why wouldn't we use it exclusively, which is more or less what has happened in the Western world. But then when you get to a crisis situation and you see that complete reliance on the banking system is maybe not so great, that maybe there are situations where using IOUs directly between companies, between people, can have quite an advantage, because it's much more flexible. Okay, you deal with people but so the idea here is that we have forgotten, and at least in the Western world, we've to a large degree forgotten that the use of IOUs can actually add to the flexibility, that it can be a good thing, and that relearning to use it might be a good thing, and maybe relearning to use it during times of COVID, maybe that's an opportunity to. So that's this article here where I argue that maybe because of COVID, companies in the Western world and developed countries will again relearn the use of credit, of IOUs. So that's as much as I wanted to say now. If there's no questions, let me check here. If there are any questions? I don't see any questions, so we can probably go over to Dragan.
Yep.
All right.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dragan, and I'm the lead developer of the SikobaPay platform. The SikobaPay platform is a system used to track, settle, and clear debt. This notion of credit, of informal credit, is being used worldwide, but it's still only used with pen and paper. The SikobaPay platform aims to, first of all, make it easier to use informal credit, but more importantly, make it more secure. By putting the platform on a blockchain, we aim to do just this. But also, we want to automate this process of clearing mutual debt in these environments. And we have a whole other suite of other issues that we handle and problems that we solve. So in the next 10-15 minutes, I will try to show you briefly the demo, to show you a demo of the beta app that we have right now. So this is this. I will share my screen in just a second. There we go. Maybe the administrator of the chat should select what I'm showing, or can everyone see my screen?
No, we can't.
Probably someone should select what's showing on my screen. I guess the admin of the... Yeah, okay, that's better.
That was me. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So this is, like I mentioned, the SikobaPay platform is in beta right now. So we are doing testing with, it's semi-open testing, as in you can download the app, but you still need a beta key issued from Sikoba in order to sign up and to start using the app. So then, let's start. First of all, this is the landing page, the dashboard, where you see your future settlements, and you just see an overview of your balance. This is per currency, and in case you had IOUs with multiple currencies, you will be able to see all these here. And this is just rather simple to give you an overview at any given time without giving you too much information. Then moving further down, we have this connection screen. Now, seeing how informal credit is used on a trust base, what we wanted to do is have a platform that will allow people to connect directly. So a connection is just that. It's you connecting with another user that you know. So for example, let's see, these connections here are active, but let's see, Abby sent me a connection request. So let's just open this. And now I can choose to either accept or reject. Let's just accept him. And once you have established a connection with a user, then you can start granting credit lines. And that brings me to the next point. And I apologize for the device being a bit slow. It's a virtual device, and it's not the fastest thing. So here I have a list of all the credit lines that I have. Yes, it does look a bit messy, but please keep in mind that this is still work in progress. So this is not this is not final by any means. So let's see. I have a bunch of these active credit lines, and what a credit line is simply a user. For example, in this case here, it says Maria can pay you, which means these are credit lines that I have granted her, and now she can pay me in each of these currencies. The amount on the left-hand side of the screen simply signifies the total amount of credit that she can have outstanding at any given moment. If she settles, then of course she can create new IOUs, etc. If I scroll a bit down here, it says you can pay Tara, and these are credit lines that Tara has granted me, and I can use these to pay her. Let's see, this is a pending credit line. So if I open this, Again, this is one of those screens which is still a work in progress. So here I have see the proposed conditions that Michael has granted for this credit line. So in total, I'll be able to have credit up to $350 Canadian. And the maximum time for settlement of any IOU created on this credit line will be 30 days. And the interest per annum will be 5%. And this one-time fee here simply means whenever I create a new IOU, there will be an additional 2% fee on the total amount that I will need to pay upfront. And we have this system for reimbursing interest. So if you settle, say you have an IOU at 30 days, $100, and you need to pay $5 of interest. If you settled earlier, based on the compound interest formula, if you settle earlier, you will be able to settle basically at less, because this would be the remainder of the interest, which technically you reimburse. So let's accept this credit line. There we go. Let's try and grant a credit line to Abby, with whom we just connected. So I'll just select Abby. And I have a list of currencies. We currently support, this is, I believe, like 20 currencies or something, but maybe even more. But it's really it's trivial to add a new currency in the system. So it's up to mostly to the feedback that we get from users on which currencies they need, and we can just add them. So I selected Abby. Let's just, I don't know, Brazilian real. Let's use this currency and say I want to, I don't actually know if that's too much, but let's put 5,000 reals, 30 days. We are good friends, so I'll just put a low interest rate. And probably no one-time fee. There we go. Confirm. And we should have a new credit line created. Let's find it. Yep, it's at the top. So it's pending, so it's up to Abby to accept this credit line. Going below, we have the user screen. So this is the screen where the user can modify his personal preferences, his default or favorite currency, if you like. So he can select again from the same list. So I don't know, just select something else, and maybe he wants to change his preferred time for settlement. Like this. And the clearing flexibility is a bit of a sort of a complex metric, which is used for the clearing algorithm. I will get into that a bit later. Here we have also the languages that we support. So we support almost a dozen languages, and we are continuously improving and adding new ones, again, according to the feedback that we get from from the beta testers. And that would be it. You can change the phone number, and the phone. Right now, the platform, you don't need an email to use it, but a phone number is required, because that's how you verify that it is indeed you and you're a real person using the platform. So I'll just submit the changes that I made. We do have QR codes, and they can make your life quite a bit easier when using the app. So for instance, if you want to connect with someone and you are right next to each other, but let's assume you have some complex username, because, well, presumably over time you have more users, and since usernames are unique, this might be a bit more complicated. So instead of having your friend type your username in, you can just show him the QR code. He scans it, and that's it. He's taken to the screen where he can send you a connection request. Now I'll go back to the dashboard. By the way, this is the button that we use for QR scanning. Since I'm on a virtual device, I'm not able to use a camera, but it's just some generic image that will show. Yeah, but this is the QR scanner, and you can use that. I'll go back and I'll try to, I'll try and issue an IOU payment. So it's really simple. You just click the dollar button on your dashboard screen, and let's say we want to pay, I don't know, Michael. We can select the currencies that we have credit lines in. So let's try pay him in dollars. And okay, so now I need to type the amount, and just under the box you see this label which has estimated payment capacity. Due to the complexity of the underlying data, let's say, there are a lot of credit lines and a lot of conversion permits, which I will explain in just a bit. It's really not effective to calculate the payment capacity to the cent, because it's not that important after all. So if you have a given the payment capacity here, you can roughly know how much you can pay. So let's just try paying $100. And this is my preferred settlement, but let's say I want to try paying in 30 days. Next. And now the system is looking up for payment options. Whoops, which means it's not possible to pay Michael in 30 days. So let's try maybe something shorter. Let's try 14 days. The system's looking up payment options again. And there we go. And the payment option is simply a path, a set of credit lines through which a payment can happen. I say a set because due to the credit conversion, which Alex explained with the bank and the user who wants to buy a car, this is basically what happens in our system as well. So if you have, say, 3 users and each of them can pay, the first user can pay the second one directly, and the second can pay the third user directly, but the first one cannot pay the third. I know it sounds a bit complicated, but I will explain it again in a bit. What you can do is you can opt for credit conversion, which enables the first user to pay someone to whom he's not directly connected, but through other people's credit lines. So I'll just go ahead with the payment. There we go. This is the confirmation screen, and yes, we confirm. So we paid 100, and we have $6.51 of fees. This does not show up here because this only shows the most the settlements which are basically need to be settled sooner. But if we open a credit line, well, this probably happened with conversion, so that's why we cannot see, because we only have one credit line with Michael. But let's just briefly go over credit conversion. All right, let's go here. So we don't have any. Okay, we have granted one conversion permit for Maria on this credit line. So like I said, conversion permits allow one user to pay another user with whom he does not have any direct credit lines. Or he may have, but if you have a conversion path available, it will also show up in the payment options. And how this works is, if you see on the right-hand side of the screen, there is this percentage of conversion fee. So basically, you can say, if this is a 500 Swiss francs credit line, I can allow up to 200 of these 200 Swiss francs to be allowed for conversion payments. Right now, none are being used, but if, for example, Maria wanted to pay Tara and she does not have a direct Swiss francs credit line to Tara, she can use my permit and my credit line to get a payment, to pay her. And of the total amount, I will get 1% fee in return for me providing the credit line. And with that, I think that concludes the demo for SikobaPay beta. And if you have any questions, I can answer them now. And one last note, this question mark here, in case you're wondering, this is just like a little help dialogue that will help you get started. And we have various links that you can consult. And, yeah. So let's see. To open a credit line, shouldn't we have a collateral? Right. So if you want to grant someone a credit line, it means that you trust that person, and you're quite certain that he will repay you. So maybe Alex can also give some input on this, but
so we are targeting people who already, or actually the main target for SikobaPay are SMEs, well, companies really, businesses, people or people who are in business and who work with each other already and who already do deals where they say, well, I buy something from you and I'll pay you next week or next month or something like that. So these are existing business relationships, existing trust relationships that we are simply leveraging. So maybe I'll briefly look at go through the sort of advantages or what the problem is that we are solving. So let me share my screen for a sec again. There we go. So this is really just from the you can get this on our website from the presentation, from a deck. So this is a description of what informal credit is. Informal credit is when people do transactions with each other and they simply pay using promises. Say, Maria, Abi buys from Maria, and then Abi owes Maria 30 pesos, right? There was no money exchange. And then maybe Maria goes to Abi's shop, buys something from him, and then she owes him. And this can go on, and you can see that they do not need money to do this. They can just write it down. That's informal credit, which doesn't mean that eventually one of them will not have to settle a balance. But generally, the idea is that working like this requires less cash or less money, less fiat money, less bank money. So what Sikoba does, it overcomes certain limitations of informal credit. And here, again, this is our standard deck where we say, well, yeah, one person says, you owe me 50 pesos, and the other says, no, I don't. Maybe he would say, well, I wrote down 40. How do you prove it? If it's on paper, if it's just informal, well, if it's registered on the Sikoba network, it's on a blockchain. Yes, that we have a proof that the debt existed. Then, let's say this woman, let's call her Maria, goes to a merchant and says, I want to buy something from you, but I don't have the cash right now. Can I pay you later? And he will say, for example, well, I don't know you, or I don't trust you simply. Maybe he knows her, but doesn't trust her for whatever reasons, right? Because they haven't done business together. Then Sikoba will try, well, again, Sikoba is the network and SikobaPay is the app. In this case, it's SikobaPay. SikobaPay will try and find a trusted intermediary, and that will make the deal possible. That means she will be able to buy something that she otherwise wouldn't have been able to do, or at least maybe a deal would have been possible, but both of them would have had to get on the phone and find someone that they both know that would be willing to guarantee the deal. And in this case, we aim to automate this. Could also be several trusted intermediaries. Then you've got the case where a debt is due, and she says, well, you owe me $100, and he says, well, I'd like to pay you, but I haven't been paid either. And what we could have is a situation of a circular debt. Now, of course, this is a very simplistic, let's say, example. It could be 100 here, 70 there, 80 there, something like that. But in any case, once you have circular debt, it can be cleared. And these three people, let's say there are three business people, they may be in different parts of town. They may not see that there is a circular debt. If they sat down around the table and talked to each other, they would see, hey, no one needs to pay, right? Everyone is clear. But if they don't, they can get, in real life, they could get nervous and be calling each other and saying, hey, pay up, etc., etc. In this case, the system sees it, the debt is cleared away automatically, problem is solved. Okay, and so we automate the clearing of debt. And finally, A businessman or some shop owner goes to the bank and says, "Can I get a loan?" And the banker says, "You don't have a credit history." And then he will tell her, for example, "Well, look, I do lots of trade on credit. I always pay on time." And the banker will say, "Well, prove it to me." And he say, "Well, it's all done informally. There's no paper trail." And that's what we provide, because with SikobaPay, this tradesman, this artisan, this shop owner, or this businessman, he will continue doing what he's doing now, meaning, having these credit relationships. But instead of being informal, they'll be registered, and not just registered anywhere, but on a blockchain. And then someday he can go and show this to the banker and say, "Look, I've always repaid my debt," and maybe that way he can get, a loan, for example. So these are the key reasons, the key advantages that we bring to these people who already use credit, but informally. So we formalize it, we make it easier and much more efficient. Okay, so stop sharing my screen.
There is another question on credit conversion within multiple currencies. So I wanted to say that due to the nature of currency exchange and sort of the risk involved in exchange ratios, etc. Right now, we do not have any exchange happening in the system. Basically, everything is per currency. So you have credit lines in one currency, and if you want to use another one with the same user, you will have to grant another credit line in that currency that you want to use. Of course, we have foreseen that at some point we will want to enable this, but for the time being, at least, everything is per currency.
Yes, I'd just like to add that for this to work, someone will need to take an exchange rate risk. So I think this will happen once we get banks in the system, because we do want to get banks in the system to provide liquidity, and also for these cases. So you could imagine a bank providing forex services and hedging services, in which case you can do a credit conversion, and you don't take the risk, because mostly traders or business people are not prepared to manage exchange rate risk. Okay. Then let me go back to just a brief note here from Pierre Fugacio about a video. So yes, I just looked very quickly what this is. I hadn't looked at it all. It's important when you look at videos on YouTube and etc. about money. There are always a lot of misconceptions. For example, in this video, it starts with saying that money started with barter, and this is, I think, researchers nowadays agree, and this has been known for decades, that is not true. Money does not originate from barter. This idea that, at one stage there were these goldsmiths that had gold and that issued more bills than they had gold. Again, that's more for myth than a reality. Another kind of not myth, but an idea that is that you need central banks for a functioning monetary system. You don't. There have been many long periods of time in countries that were quite advanced, where a banking system functioned quite well without a central bank. So it's a field. The field of monetary theory is a field which is full of misconceptions and partial truths, and you always have to keep sort of critical when you read and see stuff about money. It's unfortunate that even many economists do not have a good grasp of how money works. Okay, then there was a question here about let me just, that's the one. Do you allow IOUs shared? It's The answer is it's not planned. It's a nice idea. I mean, it is an idea. There is actually, when you introduce certain types of community currency, like a local exchange system, stuff like that, in effect, in these systems, everyone guarantees everyone. So this is a potential use case that we might implement in the future, but it's not the case now. Yeah. So it would be shared debt, or it could also be whether you ask other users to somehow back your debt or guarantee your debt. I think that's the direction that this question had, sharing or backing the debt. Yeah. Okay. Is there any? I think that's about that. These are all the questions. Please feel free to ask more questions. And meanwhile, let me ask Guillaume to tell us about some of the recent work we've done on the signature side.
Yes, sure. So indeed, it's a blockchain meetup, and we have not talked a lot about blockchain so far. So the point is that we don't use a blockchain yet, but we are working a lot to integrate blockchain technology. And so far, what we have done in this direction is to, and also for the security, because we really want to ensure that data cannot be changed on our servers, because we don't have blockchain yet. So what we have implemented is to give users the control of his account. So he basically, like same as the blockchain, he will have a master key that is a private key that is not shared by and kept only on client side. We are also working to make it very easy for the user, so it doesn't need to be a blockchain expert to manage this. Just remember a password, basically, and not the one you use for login, because we don't want to send this password to the server at any case. So basically, you have your private key that and to sign any transaction. It will be also so. If you have several devices, you can also have several related keys, let's say. So everything that you do will be a transaction that is signed by your private keys, so that we will ensure that only you can, whatever happens after in the system, nobody will be able to do any kind of transaction on your behalf. So this is very important for security, and also the fact to sign the transaction and to use only transactions that we process on server side. Then adding the blockchain layer will be very easy, because then instead of processing directly the transaction, we will just send them to the blockchain layer that will produce the block, and then we will get the consensus of the transaction, and then we will process them as we do now. So like integrating a blockchain will be easy. And we are working on this direction. And for now, what we gain is that the security. So like nobody can create a IOU for you or get money from you. It's completely safe, as long as you don't leak your master key.
Okay, thank you. To this, I would add that Guillaume is also right now working on integrating or preparing the integration of biometric IDs, basically face recognition, as an additional security layer. And we're looking at implementing a kind of community authentication process, meaning that as users authenticate each other in the system, authenticate the phone numbers, the names, etc., the addresses, you can be more and more certain that you are dealing with real users and that no one is cheating, because this is a system for real people who are known. This is absolutely not a system where people should remain anonymous. In this system, people are supposed to know each other and trust each other before using the system. The system doesn't create trust. It simply allows to leverage trust, existing trust. So there's a very fundamental concept in SikobaPay that, which is why I was at the beginning a little bit reluctant to have this rating system in. The idea is, don't do business with someone because he has a high rating, or she. You should only do business with people whom you trust and know in real life, independently of how good or high their rating is, with maybe some exceptions, such as if there's a bank in the participating system, of course, then we will tell you, or the system you will know, okay, that is a bank, and therefore you can trust that particular user. But that's the exception rather than the rule.
Well, just to give a bit more precision about this, so you can do business with somebody that you do not trust, as long as there is a path found by the system. That's the purpose of the system. Is this also? That's what you explained before with some intermediary in between. So you don't need to trust everybody, but the people that you grant a credit line, these people, you really need to trust them. And when we say you are not anonymous, it's in between your community, you will not be anonymous. But right. for other people, it's not necessary. For people outside of your community, and you can still trade with them as long as a path is found by the system.
Okay, that's an excellent remark. Thank you for that, because yes. So what just to reiterate, to repeat, because it's important to understand, is that this basic idea. You've got a shop, for example. Let's say, okay, someone comes to your shop whom you've never seen before, and let's say he wants to buy something from you, and you both use SikobaPay, and you see, okay, he buys something from you, and you see on your device, okay, payment is okay, you can whatever for. Then this person leaves. In SikobaPay, the credit that you will have will be again towards someone. Let's say someone who will owe you money will be someone whom you trust. Okay, so the person with whom you've done business, you may never have seen him or her before, but the result of the payment will be that someone whom you trust and whom you've specifically given a credit line and allowed to do credit conversion, that person or that business will owe you money. Okay, only people whom you have chosen, or only businesses and users whom you have chosen specifically, will be able to owe you money in the system. That's the sort of long version of this. But yes, very important. I have here a question from Jennifer Wilk. How often will clearing occur? Basically on a continuous basis. I mean, not just daily, it will be configurable. Can you tell us, Dragan, how often is it now?
Yes, let me just look it up just to be sure. But yes, it's definitely configurable, and we can, in the beginning, say, can be less frequent, but then we can modify it at will, basically. I'm just looking up the concrete interval. Right, so right now it's clearing every 15 minutes. But this is just simply to test and to play around with it, and obviously there are various pros and cons to consider when selecting this interval. If you make it more frequent, then potentially most of the debt cycles that you will clear are probably going to be shorter. Whereas if you let these debt graphs grow and grow, let's say for 12 hours or maybe 24 hours or 48 hours, then potentially you will have a much larger debt graph and potentially much longer cycles of debt, and thus your you're basically clearing in a more effective manner. But like I said, this is something to optimize, and we'll definitely have to come back to this in the future.
Yes. In any case, my view on this, this clearing should be done on a continuous basis, which means there'll be, depending on what we see from real usage, there could be, possibly some hours between the clearing cycles, but not days. Definitely not days. It should be, for me, it should be intraday, and then we could have situations where, if there's a time of the day when there's not many transactions, that we just run more clearing. And of course, this would have to be done automatically by the system. The system sees, okay, it's a busy period of the day. We process transactions, and we only do clearing when there's time left. And when there's not many transactions, there's time to do more clearing, more proper clearing.
So clearing is a background task. So the point is that it does not need to be real time. There is really no point on that. I agree it should be intraday thing, but as Dragan says, the longer you give time for the clearing, then the better clearing will happen. So yeah, we just need to find the right balance.
Yeah. Okay. When do we expect the platform? So here the situation is we don't know exactly. What we do know is we have one use case where our partners here in Luxembourg, they want to start using SikobaPay for real transactions, I'd say as soon as possible. So now it's going to be up to us in the next couple of weeks to decide when is the system stable and secure enough to open up, to start sort of a limited release for real transactions. We need to have the security in place, the backups, etc., so that even in the worst case, want to be sure that even in the worst case, if the system goes down, the debts that are registered are not going to be lost. The transactions do not get lost, right? Because as soon as you start having real transactions and real debt registered in the system, you cannot afford for that history, for these transactions to be lost. So my answer is, let's hope by the end of June we can start having real transactions on the Sikoba network.
Yeah, I think in terms of feature, the minimum set of features that we need for going live, we are almost there. I mean, it's as Alex said, it's more on the system side for security and performance that we need to work.
Yeah. Let's see. So that was the last question here. We did want to talk a bit about use cases. But it's been already 1 hour, so maybe I won't take too long for that. But let me go through a couple of use cases that we do have. So first of all, we're planning to implement the electronic version of a local currency here in Luxembourg. That's one thing. Then our Luxembourgish partners also want to introduce SikobaPay to the companies that currently use that local currency, but so that they might also, in addition to using the local currency, also use IOUs between themselves. So that's okay. So these are the two first use cases. So the local currency in Luxembourg, basically the use of IOUs by these mostly small and medium-sized companies. Then we have a partner in Guatemala who has a use case, and one in Colombia, which I'll describe. Both of these projects have been slightly delayed because of COVID, but they're still very much on track to get realized eventually in the next months. So the use case in Guatemala is the following. You've got the largest producer of cooking oil, delivering to several tens of thousands of small shops, and we're talking small shops, very small, usually just one guy and one woman running this little shop. So they deliver to these shops. There's a whole fleet of trucks. These trucks go from shop to shop to sell the oil and some other produce. And sometimes the shop doesn't have any money, in which case the truck has wasted time. And even if the shop needs the oil or needs the butter or whatever these things they sell, which is mostly related to oil and cooking, okay, the shop may need the oil, but may not have the money to buy it from the truck, which is a bit silly because the shop could then, sell it to its customers, get the money, buy it later, sell, pay it later, but they don't have this thing in place. The idea is to give these shops, SikobaPay, the big company, the producer of oil will give these shops, because they mostly know them, the drivers of the trucks know these shops, they will give them a small credit line, and that way when the truck comes to the shop and the shop owner for some reason doesn't have ready cash, they can still buy, okay? And then of course repay when the next time the truck comes by. So here we've got a use case for small credit lines, but for a large number of users to start with, okay? And of course these shops themselves, you have to imagine that they also give, they sell on credit to their customers, right? I mean, these are all local shops, so they know their customers. That someone comes in and say, hey, I need this and that, but I can't pay you now. I'll pay you at the end of the month when I get my salary. So they all just use this informally, write this down, etc. So they can also introduce SikobaPay then to their customers. Okay, so so you can see the volumes. These are the kind of volumes that we are targeting. SikobaPay has been designed from ground up to be extremely cheap to use and to support very large numbers of users, tens of thousands and more. The other use case is in Colombia, where the idea is to do a micro, I'd say almost nano credit business in the sense that it's should be loans for 10 euros, 20 euros, I mean $10, $20, very small amounts. For these small amounts, using cash, distributing cash and getting it back is completely unrealistic. So the way this should work is you get the people do register physically with their IDs and with their papers. Once they're registered, they can be given a credit line. With this credit line, so they don't get any cash, they only get a credit line. With that credit line, they can go to participating shops, and this apparently will not be difficult to do because the shops want to sell. So they can then buy in shops, and they can also then, the app will of course tell them when it's due, and of course they then can go to the shop to repay the debt directly to the shop, and then the shop handles all the cash transactions if necessary, whatever is due, etc. The targets there of course are large, and then of course once the shops have SikobaPay, they can also use it for other purposes. That's again the same approach. We have a use case that's microcredits. Once the users have SikobaPay, they can use it for IOUs for other intended purposes. So that is what we want. And in terms of target, our partners there are targeting 1 million users within 12 to 18 months. So again, we're looking at a use case on a massive scale, which explains this is only possible to do it for these small transactions because we're going to be very cheap in terms of transaction fees. Okay, it has to be extremely low in order to be even possible. And then we have a use case in the Philippines where it's about distributing food, distributing money to the poor, where again it's just a way to get into the market, so to speak. So the potential again is big, and there's a slum in Manila that has close to 1 million people. So right now there are organizations distributing food to tens of thousands of people. There's the government distributing money to people, and the way they do this is when they have to distribute money, they come in and they've got a whole bunch of military people, of soldiers guarding the money. And then of course there's a big problem because people don't always have IDs, and so money disappears. Some people, there's a risk that some people get the money twice and others don't get it at all. So it's very complicated. The idea here is to use SikobaPay as a way to identify people, and to, rather than give them money, give them a credit on the system, on this app, so that they can go to the stores and just buy using that. And again, you are avoiding the use of cash, right? Which makes it that then you don't need the soldiers to come and guard your money when you transport it, and it's just cheaper. And just to finish, the last use case that we are talking with, it's a German NGO. They want to do a direct giving program in Haiti later this year. And again, we're coming to this advantage of using credits rather than cash. In Kenya, there are direct giving programs by NGOs where people are given cash. Then they spend the cash in stores, and it works. It's just complicated to manage. If you give people, those even who don't have a smartphone, give them a smartphone and have basic internet connection, instead of giving them cash, you give them a credit every month on the phone. With that, they go to the stores that they go to anyway. They can buy directly from the store. If they do need cash, they can get the cash with a small fee. But generally, you reduce the admin fees because you only have to deal with the stores. Then the stores accumulate the credits, and then, of course, the NGO has to pay the stores. But rather than paying, 1,000 people, it needs to pay 100 stores, or not even 100, maybe 15 stores, a much, much smaller amount. And then, in addition, the side effect of this, again, we're in a situation where we start with a use case that is simply direct giving poor people money every month. But the side effect is that these people are then, in addition, given a tool, because these people are poor, but it doesn't mean they just sit at home and do nothing. Very often they do work. They have some economic activity. They buy it and sell. They produce something. It's just, of course, it's a small activity. It's maybe not a great deal in our eyes, but for them it's a livelihood. Okay, and so if they can also leverage SikobaPay in their own business of selling and buying and whatever they do, that could also be a plus. So we see this as leveraging SikobaPay. So that much for use cases. And licensing, well, okay, so this is a very good question, of course, about licensing. Here I would say the following. There's not just licensing, there's GDPR issues. So let me start with GDPR. The first use case we have in Luxembourg, the idea is to give this only to companies, and when you work with businesses, there is no GDPR. Then comes the licensing. So our view here is say, well, if people and companies, if they just register that, it's like writing stuff down on a piece of, in a booklet or something. We don't handle money. As long as there is no money, no bank money, okay, in the system, we are just registering. We are just a ledger for registering stuff. We don't think that we need any licensing. Also, if we start in certain countries where things are much more informal, if you go to, it'll be Guatemala or in Thailand, and we start on a small scale, and small scale, in Thailand, 10,000 people is small scale. Manila has 10 or 12 million people, right? So at the beginning, we'll stay under the radar, and sure, we'll eventually get to a stage where we'll need some kind of licensing, and as soon as we want to get banks involved, we'll need e-money license in Europe, for example. So this will come, but I think we can get going without that for some number of months. Yeah. Okay. Just case. Scrolling here through questions. I think that was. That was it. Let's see. To finish, is our organizer probably not. Okay. So we do have another question, which I'll address. Jennifer, what about people who have no smartphones? So yes, this is a question that's been asked. That's a very good question, of course. The fact is that you need smartphones. That's So if it's a place in the world where people are so poor or so far away from internet that they have no smartphones, SikobaPay will not help them so much. What we are being told and what we see is that in most places in the world today, business people and people, even if they are very small business people, they have smartphones, even if they are quite poor. Otherwise they can't do business. Okay, and our targets are mostly, despite the fact that we are, of course, addressing these issues of direct giving in Haiti, our main targets are still small businesses and micro businesses. Okay, these usually have smartphones. Then the second thing is, and we've been talks about this for the Guatemala project. If by in some cases someone doesn't have a smartphone, well, you can just sell them the smartphone and have them pay over 12 or 24 months. Yeah, so we think it's unlikely, but in Guatemala, if this shop doesn't have a smartphone, then the big company or the oil producer can then tell them, basically sell them the smartphone. Do a partnership with a smartphone producer. These are not so expensive. You can get them for, I know, at least maximum 40 euros in these countries, a basic smartphone. So you just give them the smartphone as part of the deal. And finally, that is something that we're in talks with Jala, as a company in Thailand. Jala ID is they want to issue cards, and we've started to at least discuss to see how could we link a card to SikobaPay, in the sense that someone really doesn't have a smartphone, but Jala would actually issue these cards to them, and if we could find a way to charge these cards, okay, with credit of some sort, then these people could go to the shop and they could check at the shop how much credit they have in a card. Of course, that's more for payment. It's not the same IOU system, but it would be a way to somehow address the needs of the people who have no smartphones and still be linked to a SikobaPay account or SikobaPay to the system, so they could still do a transaction with a merchant that accepts SikobaPay. Yeah, but the bottom line still is, this is a system for people who have smartphones. If they don't, in general, it won't work. But more and more business people and have smartphones. That's a message. Okay, so yeah, I think we've covered a lot. Guillaume and Dragan, did you want to add something?
Me, no. I think we said what the important stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay as well.
Yeah. So the last thing maybe to finish. So we are we've done a token airdrop recently that will be distributed probably first half of June, and we're also preparing the next round of our token sale, which will also be happening in June. And well, we're continuing to look for use cases. So if anyone listening has some ideas, has contacts, we're open to any suggestions. And if you have some ideas of how if you want to participate in the project, support us somehow, just get in touch. We're very easy to get hold of. We're on Telegram. You can get our contact info on the website, so you'll know where to find us. So thank you very much for everyone who joined today. We had some very good questions, and we'll do these meetups from time to time. So don't know how often yet, but we'll do these meetups or online events to keep up with developments. Great.
Thank you, Sikoba.
Yeah. Thank you, Benjamin. Thanks again for the Brussels Ethereum and blockchain meetup to have hosted us today. That was great.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.